Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Massalia Tales. In the previous episode we got peace with Parthiva, technically losing that war. They did take territory off us, but that peace allowed us to suddenly strike against Hayastan, quickly attacking two territories, Susa in the south, where Cretheus had to fight an extremely easy battle against the garrison that just would not give up, and then immediately after Epaphroditos moved to take Hatra, restoring the original three Mesopotamian territories that Cretheus took when he first arrived in the region. Far to the north, the two daemons of Polemus armies teamed up against the hordes of the steppe, taking a lot of damage. The Archebosporus ones anyway in that fight against their horse archers, but winning by defeating their infantry, and Bendis began a siege of one of the Nervii's strongest remaining settlements, hoping to just siege them out eventually. Finally, we saw the arrival of the first Persian army onto the war with Cretheus. Their army was filled with technologically advanced units, so finally it's time to face an army that's similar to one of our own. The foundation of the Hellenistic military doctrine had been laid down with the formation of the successor kingdoms hundreds of years earlier. Now, though, it was trade that was spreading new ideas. The methods of a Thuros-equipped soldier, in particular the professional legionary, had begun in the heart of the Massalian Republic. Through their links to the Egyptians, the technology had moved east, and then the strong relations between Massalia's eastern rivals and the neutral Egyptians had gifted the knowledge to the likes of Hayastan, Persia, and Arachosia. So that meant that the later part of Cretheus' eastern conquests were contested by men of equal caliber to his own, an experience Massalians were so far quite unfamiliar with. Cretheus forms up to fight this battle with Persia's professional army. He's using his regular formation, the ballistas at the back, going to have a target right away because the enemy has a nice high-value unit leading their attack. It's Indian war elephants, a very powerful unit coming up in front of their army. They're advancing in a lot of disarray actually, their formation very broken up. They're going to form up as they get closer. So they've got peltas, they've got legionaries, they've got Thuros spears, they've got all the units that Massalia usually has. So this could be an interesting fight. They're starting their battle plan with Jav-Cav attacks on both flanks, and we're going to pull in the cavalry that we have on the flanks to make sure they don't get attacked. The enemy are now just going to sit and wait for the rest of the attack to begin, a good move from the AI. So their elephants move up. My ballistas didn't manage to hit any of them as they advanced, which was a shame. Hit lots of the infantry behind them by accident, so that's something. But now that they're close, our archers are going to unleash a volley of fire arrows at the elephants, and of course elephants are easily spooked by such attacks. The rain of fire puts them into berserk mode, but unfortunately, unlike in Rome 1, berserk elephants still continue to do their attack orders, so they are still going to charge our lines rather than turn around and go back through the enemy's lines. So we'll keep bombarding them with those fire arrows, and we've got peltas to attack them when they get really close, and that's going to do a lot of damage. The main weakness to elephants is javelin attacks, and now they're taking javelins from both sides. Our javelins hammering them from the front, and the enemy's javelins trying to hit our phalanx, hit them from behind. That last elephant there going down, I think, from friendly fire from the enemy's peltas. So the elephants have been knocked out before they did any damage. They probably hit us with a few arrows, but really not used effectively, so that is great. The bad news, of course, is that that peltas fire is now going to be destroying my pike phalanx. The pike phalanx also quite weak against javelins. So some of the melee battles will now start. The enemy moving their Thuros spears against my thorax spears, basically the same unit there. They've also got lots of these legionaries. Here they just break through the pike phalanx immediately. That phalanx didn't hold up at all. Right into close melee with that unit. This unit further down is held at bay, so that's better. We want to hold those legionaries at bay because their melee stats are very high, so if we can just stop them getting into melee, then they're going to waste their strength. Over here on our left flank is the enemy's weakest attack point, using some Persian mercenary units that aren't particularly powerful, so that's going to be a key factor in our battle plan, is trying to defeat that edge of the line. I'm sending men behind the enemy, but of course we're not going to be able to do the usual rear charge madness here because these peltas are pretty strong. You can see they're actually hitting my own peltas behind the line as well, doing some damage. One option I have is to use my archers to attack the peltas, but right now I'm using them to fire at the enemy's cavalry. So my cavalry, who got behind the enemy's line, is going to get out of there. We hit the pelters, it didn't really do anything, and the enemy's responding well with spears. Plus they have their own general there, who has heavy cavalry. Both of my cav units that are medium cav, not able to contend, so we are going to have to flee out of that situation pretty rapidly. We're going to try and actually lead the general away from that back part of the line, because we might be able to take him out if he keeps following me. The Jav cav on the edges really being a nuisance right now, jabbing into our flank units, which are under a lot of pressure. Going to need to get the archers to focus them down. So this part of the fight on the far left is the best part so far. My archers trying to take part in the melee combat because of that thing where they chase units after defeating them, which they never really fixed in Rome 2. So unfortunately, we're going to have to micro a little bit there to make sure our archers targeting Jav Cav don't accidentally follow them when the Jav Cav move. We were able to successfully bait the enemy's general, so I'm going to bring him round the edge of the battlefield like this, chasing my medium cav, and also bringing their skirmish cav as well. The plan is to engage their general with my general, Cretheus, because Cretheus is the only unit that's not engaged that actually has a chance of fighting against the enemy's heavy cavalry. So the frontline engagement going okay in some places, badly in other places. Here, right in the middle, you can see we actually routed enemy unit, primarily thanks to the pelter support throwing over the top of the phalanx. So the enemy's pelters are still doing the same thing back to me, so the phalanx is taking a lot of damage as well. We're going to have some very thin pike lines here, and it's going to be difficult to actually do anything about this because the pike phalanx can't catch up with the pelters, so running after them doesn't do anything either. So here's the ambush on the enemy's general. We successfully got him into combat. We've sent in all of our cavalry. We've got 2 medium and 1 very heavy against their 1 heavy, so overall hoping for a victory against this general. We are going to be slightly damaged by the fact the enemy's skirmish cav, who also followed them in, are standing right here at the edge of the combat just throwing jabs into it, but they're probably not going to make a decisive difference at this stage, so we're going to just try and keep that combat grinding away. I tried again to make an attack on the enemy's pelters. It's useful to attack them with cav just because it stops them throwing their javelins, that's something, but the cavalry can't really defeat them, unfortunately. They're too heavy to be defeated in a close melee against a medium unit like that. I've released the dogs onto the enemy's right flank, my left flank, hoping that these dogs will be able to break apart the enemy's lesser units here and start clearing some space to move, and it's sort of working. We're also now arriving with our reinforcements. You may remember from the previous episode that we had loads of really tiny units coming in as reinforcements from a nearby garrison at Susa, and now they are going to make an impact on the battle. All of the militia hoplites are going to come into this fight with the enemy's general, and of course they have their bonus against cavalry, so even against that heavy cavalry unit they should be able to do some damage, and we see the general's morale start to reduce there. But the enemy putting a lot of pressure here on our right flank. You can see our lines getting very thin, our numbers getting low, some of the enemy even sneaking through like this pelters. The archers are going to try and fight with them in melee, but unfortunately pelters have too much armor, archers don't have enough attack, so we get these rather silly looking situations where they're all just ganging up on one guy, unable to do any damage. We're going to have to try and support this right flank very soon. They're close, very close. Not quite as disciplined, but they know what they're doing. It feels strange, doesn't it? Killing men with those shields, those helmets, those cloaks. If I were to wake up suddenly into this battle, I would think that the council had finally come to reel me in. A war between professional soldiers. Perhaps the most just way to fight, but when both sides fight with such discipline, the death toll is bound to be higher. We will have to think long and hard on the topic, for battles like these are but the prelude to a time when the Timukoi and the council finally draw their swords. This chance for a practice against such well-drilled men is truly a hint from the gods. Any army is as strong as its weakest point, though. Let's rout these pretenders. Flank left. We were able to rout the enemy's general on the right thanks to Cretheus' attack. We also were able to catch the enemy's skirmish cav into melee. That was nice of them to let me do that. So we've now got that big cavalry advantage that we need on the right flank to try and help out. In the centre, a mixed bag, heavy losses on our side, but the enemy eventually routing away. And on the left, we're also doing massive damage. Flank attacks by the arriving garrison units routed a lot of the enemy's heavier units with a lot of troops intact, so now we're just wiping them out over there, but we are going to need to bring those forces over to help out on the other side of the battlefield, but the enemy probably do retain an advantage. Here, a tiny unit of cavalry, just 9 men and horses, piling into the enemy's formation. A very bold attack. These are the men from the Susa garrison, so perhaps they have something to prove. So now they're stuck in amongst the enemy's legionaries and spears and have to fight a very dangerous melee. They are going to be supported by the citizen hoplites joining them there, and further down the line more citizen hoplites making rear attacks on the enemy's positions, managing to get the enemy to rout in some cases, those pelters leaving the melee, but the legionaries with their higher discipline take a longer time to rout, but eventually with our massive numerical and maneuver advantage we are able to surround and rout all the remaining units, and the battle actually ends in a heroic victory. Very nice for Cretheus. So that's Persia's main force, I presume defeated, putting us in a very strong position. So let's take a look at the actual results of that fight. The enemy's losses extreme, virtually the entire army going to be lost. We lost 1 regiment, only 1, and 3 from the garrison units, but that doesn't really matter. Interestingly, they only actually had to lose 1 man in order to lose the entire regiment. They were already on the verge of destruction, it seems. But anyway, this is actually a fantastic result. So Persia losing the majority of their professional army, Cretheus not losing an amount that we can't just regenerate in 1 turn, thanks to our sky-high replenishment. So actually, at the start of the next turn, our army's basically in perfect condition. We're 1 turn away now from being in absolutely perfect condition. I wanted to just chase down those Persians, but for some reason, Cretheus wasn't accepting the order. He was claiming he was unable to chase them. Told him to walk down the road a bit, and then asked him again, and then he did it. So I don't know what the problem was. He wouldn't put his shoes on or something, but finally we catch up with the enemy. Now it's especially important to be cutting down these last 2 units because it contains their super high level general, so it's nice to be denying him to the enemy, make sure he doesn't go back and buff up any other armies that come our way. So that's fantastic news. Now it's time for us to go on the offensive against Persia, and there's a settlement right there, so we might as well set up on the border ready to make an attack. Now we've also got Epaphroditos to do something with, having successfully captured Hatra, and I'm looking around at the possible higher stand targets, and I'm actually thinking about their home region up here, that walled settlement. Hard to take, but a very nice one to take, also part of the final victory province for Massalia, so we have to take it eventually. So I thought, let's start marching. It's going to take us 2 turns to get there, and his army of only 20 units isn't necessarily enough to bring down a walled settlement like that, which is going to have 20 inside as well, but we're going to try and do this anyway. Epaphroditos would be quite confident of his attack. It's kind of strange what's going on here. We've got these 3 Spartan patricians or governors just hanging around, not 100% sure what they're trying to do to Hayastan. Colchis also has 3 stacks there, and they are at war with Hayastan, so it's possible they will just suddenly attack it before we arrive, which would be a shame. It looks like Archebosphorus are moving forces down as well to take part in the war against Hayastan. So now moving to the Daemons of Polymus, that Arachosia army is in our way. As you can see, last time I discussed the fact that there's no real point in fighting it because we don't gain anything if we defeat that army. It's a relatively good army, and killing it only stops them from attacking us, and I don't think they can actually take our settlement, so that's not really much. So I was going to try and get peace with these guys so that I can basically just walk past them and ignore them. They were willing to go to peace for money. That was too much money right there, so I'm going to do the little demand offer trick where I make a demand for money, switch it to an offer, and that allows you to ask for smaller amounts of money, and that actually works out. So for 3,000, which is negligible in comparison to our treasury size, we get peace, and that's going to let Artemios just blast right past the Arachosians, and we can now make it almost all the way down to the Hayastan settlement. First I walked up to the border. I thought maybe my line of sight extending might show me something interesting, but not really. We're just going to plow in, and there's nothing between us and the settlement, so we can just go right in next turn. It does have a big garrison of 19 units, despite only being a smaller settlement, so we're going to have to deal with that, but no real problems. Now the Nervii want a peace treaty, not the first time they've asked for peace, but probably the first time they've asked for it without demanding money or something in exchange, and they actually were willing to consider being my client state, so now I had to consider, do I give them the chance to take up this offer? The thing was, there wasn't any real advantage to having them be my client state right now, because they're at war with the Cimbri, and the Cimbri will probably just take the rest of their territory, even if they are my client state. So I thought, especially because it's Bendis making this decision, we are going to try and just conquer them. If they're going to lose their territory, it should be to us rather than the Cimbri, so we'll keep this war going. So now we learn that Arachosia immediately went back on that peace treaty and joined probably Hayastan or Persia in a war against us, so that's inconvenient. They also started slightly chasing Artemios there, only moving up to the border. So it seems they do want to actually fight the Daemons of Polymus. Right now though, I'm actually going to ignore them and push on to the settlement. Inside that big army gives them a significant bit of the balance bar, not enough for us to auto-resolve our way in, so I'm going to just encircle them. First I'll see if they sally out. The risk is that Arachosia will move in and attack me, but I think Hayastan have their turn first, which means if they do sally out right away, they can't do that. We'll just see what happens, because even if we have to fight both armies, I'm actually secretly confident that that would be possible. So now for Cretheus, we're going to move on Gore here. This is another settlement with a powerful garrison inside it, and actually the garrison massively overpowers Cretheus according to this balance bar, which I thought was strange. I think these Persian garrison spearmen must actually be pretty good, maybe they're like garrison hoplites. So we're going to have to just siege them out. They've got 4 turns of supplies as well, so that'll be a long siege, but there's a decent chance that they will sally, and then we'll see how powerful they really are on the battlefield. And for Epaphroditos, unfortunately Colchis did go on and capture the Hayastan capital, so that plan's not going to help. And they also captured the other border settlement Hayastan have with us, so now we're going to have to move a really long way to find some new territory to conquer. Culture's really clearing up, actually quite annoying for my ally to be so successful like that. Not much we can do, eh? Cretheus got his money's worth in those cultures sellswords. They took everything away from the enemy and everything away from me, so in the end it is he himself reaping all the rewards of victory. The men are not going to be happy with this, not at all, and they're going to channel their anger onto me, no doubt. How dare I march them all the way over here and then all the way back with no reward? I could tell them that it's because their reward is currently gripped in the sweaty palms of Cretheus' cronies, but I think not. There's the truth, and then there's openly inciting rebellion. Yes, they happen to be the same here, but we'll struggle to convince the history writers of that. So, back we go then. As we move on, Hayastan come to me asking for a peace treaty. I didn't really expect this. I thought they would just see this war right until the very end. So, an interesting idea, and they have a high chance of becoming my client state if I give them a peace treaty. So that could be interesting considering that they're quite big, so that would actually give me a load of money if I made them my client state. I don't really trust them though to be my client state whilst so powerful. I think I would rather stay at war with them and take a few more territories off them before we consider trying to subjugate them in this way. So I'm going to reject the deal, but it's nice to know that they would accept it for future use. And we go past the Arakosia turn there with no action, and here we are. We can see that Arakosia have just stayed on the border, but actually Parthiva have moved up an army. The Watchmen, curiously enough, watching us besieging Hayastan by the looks of it. So I don't really know what they're doing up here with a stack, but it's not going to be of much concern to us. Epaphroditos now going to continue his march towards some Hayastan territory. It looks like he'll have a clear chance of actually getting there before cultures attack them or anything, so we might be able to continue our war with Hayastan in that way. The Nervii ask for peace if we give them money, an outrageous proposition. I rejected out of hand, and now they sally out for a big battle with Bendis and Eustachus, and I decided just to move things along since the Nervii army is so weak. I'll just auto-resolve this away. We are going to take 30% losses, which is nothing really to snuff at. It does mean these units are going to lose experience as they replenish after this battle, which is a shame, although that was probably the last major fight they'll have in this war, because Nervii are really now out of the game. Hayastan come back, making pretty much the same offer that the Nervii just did. They want peace and ask for 2,000, and then make a siege sally as well. So following the example set by the Nervii after seeing how it didn't work, they're going to sally against Artemios, but unfortunately their force is too powerful for us to auto-resolve it. So it's another one of these battles where it's so easy and it's almost inconvenient to have to bother fighting it. So we're going to do this as another exciting double-speed live battle. So the enemy are just going to charge right into the Hoplite phalanx. That is fine. Out here on the flank, they've actually outflanked me, and I've been quite negligent in setting up the line properly, so they almost got round to my back lines. They're light cavalry charging into my swords. Not a totally unreasonable engagement there, but we'll win in the end just because we have superior melee stats. And those cavalry, as you can see, kind of break through. They just run through the sword unit in the end. So now they're behind my lines, potentially dangerous. My cav are behind their lines, of course, and we're going to wipe out all of their skirmishing forces really quickly now. Going to make sure they don't inflict any casualties on us, because they're probably the main unit that could kill us. But right here, the enemy actually get a pretty nice sandwich attack on that sword unit after leading it astray and leading it away from the line. So that was a nice move. It brings that sword unit down into the yellow, and I'm going to have to pull some spears off the main line to go and fight with those cav. But actually around this point the rest of the enemy's army is defeated, so a chain rout defeats the cav anyway. So that's another quick decisive victory. Let's check out the results. Actually a shame what happened to that sword unit, because we would have won that with basically no losses. Instead we did lose men, still only double figures, nothing to worry about. The enemy's garrison in massive trouble. They are out of supplies, so that means at the end of this end-turn sequence they are going to surrender to us, so I let the survivors go. But before that, Arakosia actually does come in this time to make an attack. I thought the garrison survivors might come out to reinforce, but I guess they can't take part in 2 battles or something because they're not involved. The balance bar, though, still really far in the enemy's favour just because their units are so teched up. The Daemons of Polymus actually have a very technologically backward army using the units from the very beginning of the game. They're just very experienced, so this could be an interesting fight. It's the best of the old guard versus the new guard. We take up a nice standard formation, the balance bar now less in the enemy's favour than it was on the battle initiation screen, so that's good news. So we're going to form a big phalanx. At the ends of the hoplite phalanx we have pike phalanx units to provide extra stability right on the ends of those lines, but the majority is just good old hoplites back from the start of the game, so hopefully they'll be able to do the job. The enemy advancing in a massive line basically. They've got their general and heavy cavalry on the edge, and then loads of these legionaries marching in those perfectly formed up lines, so much discipline there. Then further down on their left side they have some of the worst units. They've got some mercenaries and they've got thorax hoplites, not quite up to snuff with legionaries but on the same tier, still late game infantry. They're leading with 3 units of pelters, not much else in terms of their skirmish line, so they have a lot more infantry than me because I have more manpower invested into ranged units like javelins, archers and slingers. So that means in a skirmish battle we probably would win, and they're unlikely to stop for a skirmish. We're going to be raining arrows on those pelters as they come in. Big shields and armor means it's not really doing anything. As you can see, they just run right through it, but slowly that will do damage to the enemy. So they're going to have a chance to throw their javelins at the hoplite phalanx, which would be a fine move from them. The rest of their units just going to charge right in, no skirmish for this battle. Some of these units are going to throw javelins of their own into the melee. So here on the far right hand side of our line, this is going to be the easiest technically part of the engagement because it's just a bunch of other hoplites charging into the front. So even if we're losing the engagement, it will happen very slowly. And then further along are the more dangerous parts where legionaries are going to be pressing in. Here the enemy's cavalry attacking the pike wall, a classic mistake, that's not a problem. But right here on the far left, 3 units of legionaries all piling into this 1 unit of hoplites. That's going to put a massive amount of pressure on those guys. The disease of Greece is spreading again, my brothers. They are like no other plague, more deadly and more unforgiving than any ailment the spirits will inflict. They are a thinking, scheming plague that will bring you good health to conceal the poison they sow when your back is turned. They will wish you well in order to tempt you into a pit of torturing blades. They have fooled many, these demons, but not us. We know that in reality they are men. Men who bleed, men who have grown beyond the years of strength and now offer little but a target to practice our sword work against. We have the finest arms the world has ever known, and the most hated enemy. This is the day that we will speak of every day from now on. The day we saved Aracosia. So the fight is going to quickly turn into a grind on the melee front, and on the range front I'm going to use all my ranged units to first try and bring down the pelters rather than focusing on the infantry, because I really want to minimise the number of javelins that are going to be hitting these phalanxes, since they are going to be able to do a lot of damage. They probably will inflict some friendly fire as well because they're throwing slightly downhill, but overall we definitely want to stop those pelters from attacking as much as we can. The enemy's general making another attack there on a hoplite line, not quite as bad as attacking a pipeline, and one guy there even getting all the way through, but still not going to be using his general effectively there. These legionaries are going to be more difficult to deal with though. They're very strong. Their only weakness really in our army is against the javelins, so once we run out there's not much we can do to bring them down because of their very high melee stats. Now, like in the previous battle we saw, I'm going to use my medium cav to bait the enemy's heavy cavalry to come out and bring them actually around to the back of my formation. We've got Artemios back there with his own hoplites, so that's a nice unit to bring the cav down. On the other flank, swords going around the enemy do a massive jab attack on the back of this unit, but you can see he doesn't really do anything. This unit's so armoured they can just take that wave of jabs, and the swords will now go in to do some close sword work in melee and try and bring them down. So the baiting is working. You can see I'm bringing his medium cav back while Artemios charges forward to meet their general. I've also got a sword unit behind their lines to engage one of their pelters into melee. Now I thought this would be a surefire win, but actually as you can see the peltists are more heavily equipped than these earlier game sword units, so they actually hold out really well. We are going to beat them eventually, it's just going to be a very slow process. So Artemios now moves in to spring the trap on the enemy's general, so we've got our 2 cav units and those royal hoplites together. They're going to have a definitive advantage over that heavy cav unit, so that is all fine. But it's actually just the main fight that I'm really worried about. You can see these hoplite units are getting really damaged really fast. This unit's lost half its men fighting against these legionaries, and now that we're basically out of javelins, our ability to deplete the legionaries' numbers is waning. We're still going to have archer support, but that's not quite as useful against these heavily armoured units. So multiple hoplite units in our front line starting to suffer heavy casualties. Luckily their high morale means it's not becoming a problem right now. So we do finally take down those pelters out behind the enemy's line. That's going to give me a free unit behind their lines to come in and do rear attacks with, so that's going to be vital. And Artemios successfully pushes away the enemy's general. The enemy's army is sufficiently disciplined that it's probably not going to make a huge difference to their morale losing their general like that. I think these units are actually invulnerable to the morale shock of losing a general. So they're just going to keep ploughing on, and our men are going to keep getting depleted until we can do something to try and demoralize the enemy, because they have that heavy infantry advantage right now. My flank attack on our right is itself outflanked by an enemy unit returning from routing, I think, so that's making life a little bit difficult over there. We are starting to see a breakthrough here where some of the enemy's weaker units in the centre are fighting, so that's fantastic, but the legionaries still holding strong. Here though, we managed to get a rear attack with our sword unit, and that actually pushes one of the most damaged units of legionaries out of the fight. The rest are going to continue battling, and our swords will struggle against the enemy swords there, so although we're going to be fighting on two sides, it's still not totally ideal. Luckily, for reasons unknown, we suddenly see this chain route on the right side of the battlefield, so that's absolutely amazing. All of the enemy's slightly weaker units with the thorax, Hoplites, start leaving, and we're just going to plough in, since we've already sort of got them outflanked, and try and damage these units so they can't come back from routing. This is a chance to do enormous damage to the enemy's army overall. One unit staying in the fight with the pikes there, not going to make much difference though. We're going to slowly outflank and destroy them. So that's really suddenly turned the battle around. We now have loads of free units. They can start doing rear attacks all over the place, and just in time, because as you can see, my Hoplite phalanx was on the verge of breaking against the enemy. So after a short period of just moving all my units into position and getting around the enemy, we are able to chain rout the remaining forces, and that's actually a heroic victory for Artemios. So a tiny bit of a close one for the Daemons of Polymus, but overall a fantastic victory against a superior army. So that means no more bother from Arachosia. Hopefully we'll see how it continues next time. To the shock of the leaders marching against Massalia, their bartered-for technological advantage was not enough to make victory a certain outcome. Although the Massalian equipment had found its way east, their military strategies had not. Eastern commanders were using the same tactics previously used to conduct war with large levied armies. For smaller, professional armies, the potential was so much more, but only the Massalians leveraged to this potential. As a result, in the major battles of 203 BC, in which Cretheus and Artemios found themselves outclassed on the field, they were able to forge victories through superior infantry company tactics. Although the losses they took were considerable, the morale of their enemies was totally destroyed.